back, friends. It is Chalk Talk Thursday again. Back with you. Let's go on and finish up this conversation about dopamine. It's actually one of my favorite topics. It's very interesting because I think this is a big issue when people are trying to gain health. There's so much information about what you need to do to be healthy. A lot of times we don't realize that it's hard for people even to get to that place because it's hard to be motivated to get there. And motivation is a real thing. It's a chemical thing. And so when patients come to me, I'm not the type of provider that says, hey, get with it, be optimistic, go meditate, as if we can actually think and get on track to this very complex action. In order to change our behaviors, to change our life, it really takes a lot of motivation. And so it's a very complex issue, and so I really do pay attention to that when patients are coming in, because a lot of times it doesn't do me any good to go through all the complexities of metabolism when there's not enough dopamine even to start. And so I know a lot of people well, all of us anyway, sit on the spectrum of dopamine. Some of us, as I remember, said that dopamine is has two sides to it. And really, we really want our dopamine to be not too much and not too little. And so at different times in our lives, we are in different parts of that spectrum. Some of us like to sit on the high end. Some of us genetically sit on the high end. I'm one of those. I genetically carry a lot of dopamine. I've actually checked it. Problem with those of us that carry a lot of dopamine, we can stay here in the higher end of the curve and chase a lot of dopamine and be productive and learn a lot and be driven. But the problem is, if we push ourselves over the edge, we burn out. We find ourselves wired and tired. So it's a double-edged sword. Even though it feels great to have dopamine, to feel good, to feel productive, to have some drive and to have some energy behind that, you actually burn out if you have too much of it and go on for too long. So you need a balance. There's a handful of folks who are on the lower end who don't have enough dopamine. And you would feel basically unmotivated. It's hard to feel focused. It's hard to be driven. It's hard to process information and learn. And you also feel fatigued for a different reason. You feel mental fatigue because you need a lot of energy to be productive, and that's what we get from dopamine. So dopamine is a part of energy and a mental level. And so, as I mentioned last time, sometimes in my clinic, I don't see a lot of folks who are low dopamine because it's hard for them to get to me. So that's why I wanted to really focus in on that, so that if you're stuck in that place, you at least have some idea of what that means, and you can start working on getting to a place that you can go find some help, or at least get to that next step of momentum and motivation. So as I mentioned, dopamine is the great motivator. It's actually a reward molecule as well, and that's what I left off saying, that social media, business, everybody understands dopamine because they know if they wanted you to purchase something, if they wanted you to buy something, all they need to do is click a little bit of dopamine for you, feed you with a little bit of a dopamine sensation, and we'll buy. And so it's one of those rewards. We feel good with it. The unfortunate thing is that, especially for folks like me who carry too much dopamine, it actually needs to break down, and it doesn't live very long, so it's short-lived. And when it breaks down, it's going to break down to adrenaline and cortisol. And so then we get into further problems, and that's where the burnout comes from. And so it's a very fine line with dopamine. But how do we run that fine line? We do want it. We want to stay in this blissful state so we can stay motivated, learn, and focused. Now, how do we get to this place? So there's a couple of other ones that I've mentioned that sort of balance out this particularly dopamine. And so those chemicals or neurochemistry are serotonin and endorphins. Endorphins actually act like dopamine. They give us energy, it gives us a little feeling of reward, but endorphins won't necessarily burn us out like dopamine. So it's a better type of feel-good, and it lives a little bit longer. So if we can get a little bit more endorphin, we'll do better. Whereas dopamine, we get a little bit more of a reward, and that tends to get us sort of stuck in a wanting, desiring cycle, where endorphins is just a feel good. I feel content. Serotonin, on the other hand, is the relaxed neurotransmitter. It actually helps us from a mood standpoint. When our serotonin's too low, we don't feel very good. We're probably depressed and anxious. But serotonin also reels in dopamine. And so, as you can see, when it comes to motivation and being able to just get focused and driven, it's really complex in our head. And so there's a lot of things that affect that. And so there's ways we can actually get some of that naturally. So the first thing is, all of these really require a healthy brain. And so a healthy brain means, we're eating healthy foods. So here's the time where it really does make a difference. If you really want to get motivated to focus in on those types of foods that are really helping your brain. A lot of those are like, types of omegas, fats, good proteins, good sources of protein, because those are really important for neurotransmitters. Probably other important things that are really are going to up your endorphin is just exercise. And I know you can say, well, I'm not motivated, how am I going to exercise? Well, at some point we got to step a little bit up and try and get going, and because you have to sort of take that first step to start the momentum. But trying to find somebody, another buddy who sort of can account, or at least be your accountability partner, just to sort of just get you rolling into some motivation. Other important things are sleep. Sleep is very important to reset all of these important neurochemistry. A lot of times we don't, or most of the time we're not getting restful sleep, and so I really hone in on patients to really focus in on your sleep cycle, especially since the summer's coming. We don't get to bed soon enough. There's a lot of light exposure, so sometimes being really conscientious of the hour before sleep, that you're turning things down, at least you're turning TVs off, getting off the social media, so that you're not stimulating your brain too much. These are simple ways to get started, to get some balance. A big important factor with all of this is gut health, because the irony in this all is everything that helps our brain comes from our gut. It's obvious our food comes from our gut, but the gut is actually making the chemistry. The gut is making precursors of serotonin. The gut is making precursors for dopamine. And so it's not uncommon for my patients having really big gut issues have problems with brain issues as well. And so there's a direct connection between those two. It's very complex, but just at least let you realize that your motivation probably is more complex than you think. It's and maybe starting to look into all these other things to help you out will help you be more successful with that, getting some better gut health. And if you don't look into different podcasts that are talking about good gut health, leaky gut, gut restoration, those might be places to start if you can't come and see somebody like me. But if you can't come and see somebody like me, what do I do when I have somebody like this? We get a good gut program online. I actually check your neurotransmitters. There's a wonderful test called the urine organic acids test, where I can actually see where your dopamine, your serotonin, your gut health, your liver detox, your mitochondria, all these nutrients that you need to keep your brain healthy, like your B vitamins. I can look at all of those off of one single test, and then I have genetic tests that I look at that can look at your dopamine receptors and see if you're one of those COMT people like myself who just lives off a lot of dopamine. So there's a lot of really complex, cool stuff that we can do to sort of look into this. But I just want you all to realize that motivation is very complex. It's just not get in your head and get with the program. Sometimes it's like maybe you need to look and see what are these particular things might be getting in the way of your motivation, and set up some program that has some quantitative guidance to say, hey, yeah, I have, I'm on this part of the dopamine curve, or I'm on this part of the dopamine curve. And by the way, a lot of mental health conditions I deal with, whether it's depression or anxiety, that have to do with attention and focus, sit here. So a big one is ADHD. So there's a lot of ADHD going on right now, and it has to do with a lot of poor brain health in terms of our nutrition and a lot of our experiences. So it all falls on dopamine, and trying to support that for folks. And so a large range of folks that I take care of, and I know you fall in here some more, but I just want to give you some more information so that you can sort of at least start diving into some direction on how to get back on track with health and chase optimal health and energy. If you want help with that, come and see me. Otherwise, have a good week.